The cool autumn breeze whispered through the trees lining the quiet street in Sausalito, California, gently rustling the amber leaves scattered across the pavement. Jasmine Tyrell adjusted the strap of her worn leather bag, her heart beating nervously as she approached the polished glass doors of the towering corporate building looming ahead. The sleek silver sign above the entrance read, Rains Technologies. Jasmine paused, took a deep breath, and pushed open the heavy glass door, stepping into an impeccably designed lobby, its minimalistic decor accentuating a sterile, impersonal elegance. Her appointment had been confirmed for weeks, yet she couldn't shake the strange mixture of anticipation and anxiety pulsing through her veins. She was here to meet Leighton Rains, the elusive billionaire CEO whose business ventures consistently made headlines, yet whose personal life remained a tightly guarded secret. Jasmine had only agreed to the surreal arrangement after weeks of internal debate, desperate for a way to pay off crippling family debts and give herself a fresh start. Her role? Surrogate mother to Leighton's heir, an arrangement based purely on business, devoid of emotional entanglements. At least, that's what the thick packet of legal documents had claimed. Miss Tyrell, came a clear, professional voice, breaking Jasmine from her anxious thoughts. She turned to find a poised young woman in a tailored black suit, tablet in hand, smiling politely yet distantly. "Yes, that's me," Jasmine answered softly, brushing a stray curl behind her ear and forcing a confident smile. "Mr. Rains is expecting you." "Please, follow me," the woman replied smoothly, pivoting gracefully on her heels and heading toward an elevator. Jasmine followed quietly, her heart thudding loudly enough she worried the woman might hear. The elevator ride seemed endless as it glided silently upward to the top floor, where the doors slid open to reveal another stylishly minimalist reception area, accented by abstract art and brushed steel furnishings. Jasmine's guide nodded toward a massive, imposing set of mahogany doors. "Right through there," the assistant instructed, her tone quietly encouraging yet entirely impersonal. "Thank you," Jasmine murmured, stepping toward the doors. Her pulse quickened again as she knocked gently, barely hearing the deep, authoritative voice that instructed her to enter. Inside, the office was vast, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a spectacular view of the bay, sunlight sparkling off the water. Yet Jasmine's attention was immediately drawn to the man seated behind a sleek, ultramodern desk. Leighton Rains was even more striking in person than his images suggested. Tall, impeccably groomed, with dark hair that caught the late morning sunlight, illuminating subtle highlights of copper. His eyes, a penetrating shade of storm gray, assessed her with unmasked curiosity. "Miss Tyrell," he greeted, rising smoothly from his seat, buttoning his jacket as he walked toward her. His voice, rich and resonant, filled the room effortlessly. "I'm glad you could come." Jasmine reached out to shake his outstretched hand, noting with surprise that his grip, though firm, held unexpected warmth. "Thank you for seeing me, Mr. Rains," she replied, striving for confidence in her tone. "Leighton, please," he corrected gently, guiding her toward a plush set of chairs near the windows. "We're entering into something incredibly personal, despite its contractual nature. Formalities will only complicate things." Settling into the soft chair, Jasmine drew another breath, gathering herself before meeting his intense gaze. "Very well, Leighton. I appreciate your honesty." Leighton leaned back slightly, studying her carefully. His gaze was intense yet respectful. "I want to be very clear, Jasmine," he began slowly, each word carefully chosen. "I understand that what I'm asking is far from ordinary. You have every right to be hesitant." She nodded slowly, her mind recalling every sleepless night she'd spent poring over the agreement, weighing the implications, both financial and emotional. "It's not a decision I've made lightly," she admitted, meeting his eyes with sincerity. "But my reasons are strong enough to outweigh any concerns. I want you to know that I'm committed." Leighton's eyes softened marginally, something akin to relief flickering briefly across his controlled expression. "Good," he murmured quietly, his voice taking on an almost contemplative tone. "I'm relieved. Frankly, I need this to work smoothly, and your confidence reassures me greatly. He rose suddenly, moving to a small table near the window where a decanter and crystal glasses sat neatly arranged. Pouring a glass of water, he turned back to Jasmine, his eyes carefully watching her reaction. My lawyers have informed you thoroughly about all terms. There are no lingering questions, he asked, handing her the glass. She took a careful sip, grateful for the coolness easing the dryness in her throat. They were very clear, she replied honestly. No contact after birth, full confidentiality, generous compensation. All the points were explicit. He nodded thoughtfully, his expression unreadable. And you're comfortable with that? Jasmine hesitated only briefly, then nodded decisively. Yes, I am. My decision is final. Leighton's gaze lingered on her for a moment longer than necessary, something briefly flickering in his eyes before he resumed his usual composed demeanor. Excellent. We'll begin soon. You'll have every possible comfort and care during the process. Jasmine released a quiet sigh, finally feeling a tension she hadn't realized she'd been holding slowly ease from her shoulders. Despite the strangeness, she felt a sense of reassurance in his calm confidence. Perhaps, she thought with cautious optimism, this arrangement might not be as impersonal as she'd feared. As Leighton escorted her toward the door, she caught his reflection in the glass panel, noticing for the first time a subtle tension in his jawline, hinting at emotions he kept hidden beneath layers of practiced control. Stepping into the elevator moments later, Jasmine felt a strange sense of both relief and anticipation. Something told her that despite their carefully defined agreement, her life, and perhaps even Leighton's, was about to change in ways neither of them could possibly anticipate. 3 weeks after Jasmine's initial meeting with Leighton, the quiet solitude of her small apartment had become strangely comforting. Her mornings were now carefully planned, consumed by routine checkups and meticulous attention to her physical health. This new normal was a stark contrast to her previously chaotic schedule filled with part-time jobs and constant anxiety about financial obligations. Despite the unusual nature of her situation, Jasmine felt oddly at peace, reassured by Leighton's promise of complete care and support. Today, however, felt different. Jasmine sat nervously in the cozy waiting area of Dr. Meredith Calloway's upscale fertility clinic, staring absently at the wall clock. Each tick echoed louder in her ears, amplifying her sense of unease. Dr. Calloway had summoned her for an urgent follow-up, something that had not happened before, setting Jasmine's nerves on edge. Jasmine Tyrell? The soft voice of the clinic receptionist pulled her from her anxious thoughts. Yes, Jasmine replied, standing quickly, smoothing the wrinkles from her blouse. Dr. Calloway will see you now. Right this way, the receptionist smiled warmly, guiding her down a brightly lit hallway decorated with serene artwork meant to soothe anxious patients. Jasmine followed, pulse quickening with each step. Dr. Meredith Calloway, a warm, middle-aged woman with kind, intelligent eyes and a reassuring presence, greeted Jasmine with a comforting smile as she entered the private consultation room. Jasmine relaxed slightly, reassured by the familiar face that had become a comforting presence in these uncertain weeks. Good morning, Jasmine. Please, have a seat. Dr. Calloway gestured gently toward the cushioned chair across her polished oak desk. Jasmine sat carefully, forcing herself to meet the doctor's calm gaze. Good morning. Your call seemed urgent. Is everything all right? She asked, her voice tight despite her attempt to appear composed. Dr. Calloway leaned forward slightly, resting her elbows gently on the desk. Her demeanor remained gentle, though Jasmine detected subtle tension in her posture. Jasmine, there's something important we discovered during your latest ultrasound that I felt needed to be discussed immediately. Jasmine's heart dropped, her throat tightening with sudden anxiety. Is everything okay with the baby? A gentle smile broke across Dr. Calloway's lips. The babies, Jasmine. You're pregnant with twins. The room seemed to spin slightly as Jasmine absorbed the unexpected news. Twins? That wasn't part of the original arrangement. Her mind raced instantly to Leighton and his carefully constructed plans. How would he react? Would this change everything? Twins, she echoed softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Are you certain? Dr. Calloway nodded, her expression carefully reassuring. Absolutely. We detected 2 healthy heartbeats. Both appear strong, and from what we can see, everything looks very promising. Jasmine drew a shaky breath, her mind already overwhelmed by the implications. Layton's instructions had been explicit: 1 child, 1 heir, uncomplicated and controlled. She wasn't sure how this revelation might shift the dynamic, but deep inside, an unexpected surge of protectiveness emerged. Already she felt a strong connection, stronger than she'd expected at this early stage. Do you want me to inform Mr. Rains, or would you prefer to tell him yourself? Dr. Calloway gently interrupted Jasmine's racing thoughts. I'll do it, Jasmine replied, straightening in her chair as she regained composure. I think this news should come directly from me. Dr. Calloway nodded understandingly. That's wise. You'll likely have some adjustments to make regarding prenatal care, and the sooner you can clarify arrangements with him, the better. After leaving the clinic, Jasmine sat in her car for several long moments, fingers gripping the steering wheel tightly. The quiet hum of traffic passed unnoticed as she contemplated her next step. Finally, summoning courage she didn't entirely feel, she picked up her phone and dialed Layton's direct number, given to her by his assistant for emergencies. His deep, smooth voice answered after the second ring. Jasmine? Is everything all right? She paused momentarily, gathering herself before speaking clearly. We need to talk, Layton. Something unexpected has come up. Could we meet today? There was a brief silence from his end. She sensed tension immediately tightening through his voice when he finally spoke again, measured and cautious. Of course. Come to the house as soon as you're able. Less than 2 hours later, Jasmine found herself again walking up to the imposing front entrance of Layton's luxurious mansion overlooking San Francisco Bay. This time, her nerves felt different, weighted not by uncertainty about their arrangement, but by anxiety over Layton's reaction to news she herself was still processing. Layton himself opened the door, surprising Jasmine by his immediacy. His gaze, typically confident and inscrutable, now revealed a flicker of concern. Come in, he said quietly, stepping aside to allow her entrance. As the door closed softly behind them, he guided her gently into a comfortable, elegant sitting room flooded by natural sunlight from the expansive windows. Jasmine took a seat, clasping her hands nervously in her lap. What happened, Jasmine? You sounded concerned. He studied her intently, gray eyes searching her expression. Jasmine took a deep breath, steadying herself. I saw Dr. Calloway today. She called me in urgently for follow-up results. Layton's expression darkened briefly, shadows crossing his handsome features. Is something wrong? No, not exactly, Jasmine reassured quickly, noticing his sudden vulnerability. But it is surprising news. He leaned forward slightly, waiting patiently but with palpable tension. Tell me. I'm pregnant with twins, Layton. Her voice was steady now, though her pulse raced nervously. She watched his reaction closely, apprehensive of disappointment or frustration. Shock registered briefly in Layton's features, swiftly masked by practiced neutrality. He stood abruptly, pacing a short distance across the room, obviously grappling with the unexpected revelation. When he turned back, Jasmine glimpsed a profound inner turmoil beneath his usually polished exterior. Twins, he repeated softly, almost to himself, running a hand distractedly through his dark hair. This complicates things. I know, Jasmine admitted softly, watching him carefully. But it doesn't have to change our agreement. Layton's eyes met hers sharply, something unreadable flickering briefly in their depths. No, Jasmine, this changes everything. You'll need better care, more support. You'll move here immediately. I'll have rooms prepared for you today. But, Jasmine started, uncertainty filling her voice, overwhelmed by his swift decision. No objections, he interrupted firmly, though his tone softened slightly. Your safety, and theirs, is now my highest priority. Jasmine, both startled and touched by his sudden protectiveness, could only nod, realizing their carefully constructed boundaries had already begun to shift dramatically. As she glanced around the lavish home, her new reality began to sink in. She was not only carrying Leighton Raines's heirs, but she would now be living under his constant, watchful care. For better or worse, their lives were now bound more tightly than either had anticipated, and Jasmine suspected the surprises had only just begun. The first few days at Leighton's estate passed in an uneasy blur, Jasmine adjusting cautiously to her unfamiliar surroundings. Though every luxury imaginable was at her fingertips, from the beautifully appointed private suite overlooking the lush gardens, to gourmet meals crafted specifically for her nutritional needs, she felt distinctly out of place. It was as if she'd wandered into a carefully curated magazine spread, beautiful yet coldly impersonal. Despite the initial awkwardness, Jasmine found herself slowly becoming accustomed to the grandeur. More importantly, she found herself increasingly curious about Leighton Raines. His personality seemed layered with contradictions, moments of aloof detachment interspersed with surprising bursts of kindness. Yet, through it all, he maintained a meticulously professional distance, polite yet intentionally reserved. One morning, as sunlight filtered warmly through gauzy curtains, Jasmine rose early and quietly descended the wide marble staircase, heading toward the spacious kitchen. The mansion felt especially quiet today, the staff moving discreetly in the background, their presence hardly noticeable. She was sipping freshly squeezed orange juice at the breakfast bar when Leighton unexpectedly appeared, dressed casually in dark jeans and a crisp white shirt, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. Jasmine startled slightly at his sudden appearance, nearly dropping her glass. He noticed and raised his hand apologetically. "I'm sorry, Jasmine. I didn't mean to frighten you," Leighton offered softly, a faint smile briefly appearing at the corners of his mouth. She laughed awkwardly, feeling a flush rise to her cheeks. "It's okay, really. I was lost in thought." Leighton moved toward the coffee maker, his posture relaxed, yet his eyes remained quietly observant. "Are you adjusting well? I realize this must be quite overwhelming." Jasmine hesitated slightly before answering honestly, deciding transparency was her best path forward. "It's a lot to take in. Beautiful, but overwhelming. I'm used to a much simpler life." Leighton handed her a warm, reassuring smile, genuine enough that it surprised her. "Believe it or not, I know exactly how you feel. This place can sometimes feel more like a museum than a home." Her interest piqued, Jasmine tilted her head curiously. "You don't seem the type to be uncomfortable anywhere. You appear to have everything under perfect control." A shadow passed briefly over Leighton's face, and Jasmine immediately sensed she'd touched something deep beneath his careful composure. "Appearances can be deceiving," he murmured, looking down at the cup of coffee he'd just poured. A brief silence settled between them, comfortable yet charged with a subtle intensity. Feeling bold, Jasmine ventured further. "May I ask something personal?" He met her gaze directly, his gray eyes softening slightly. "Go ahead. Why did you choose to do this alone? Surely you could have found a partner easily." Leighton paused, as if carefully weighing his words. Finally, he sighed gently, leaning slightly against the marble countertop. "Relationships complicate things. I've found it's easier to manage life when I keep personal ties minimal." "You mean safer?" Jasmine asked softly, sensing vulnerability beneath his words. He glanced at her sharply, surprise evident in his eyes before he relaxed again. "Perhaps safer is more accurate, yes. When you're responsible for so much, personal connections become potential weaknesses. Or they can make you stronger," she offered quietly, her voice gentle but firm. He looked thoughtful, clearly affected by her insight. "Maybe. But strength built from personal bonds also means risk, loss is inevitable, eventually." She saw genuine sadness flicker briefly across his expression, igniting a sudden desire within her to comfort him. Before she could respond, he smoothly redirected the conversation. "Let me show you something," Leighton said abruptly, standing straighter, clearly eager to move away from deeper waters. Jasmine followed, intrigued, as he led her through the home toward a previously unseen part of the mansion. They entered a beautiful, warmly lit room filled with comfortable furniture, bookshelves, and artwork that contrasted sharply with the rest of the starkly minimalistic house. "My personal library," Leighton explained gently, noticing Jasmine's intrigued expression. "This is the only place where I allow myself to feel truly comfortable. My sister used to call it our secret sanctuary." "Your sister?" Jasmine echoed softly, sensing a tender vulnerability in his tone. Leighton paused, his fingers lightly tracing the spine of a worn leather-bound book. "My twin sister, Laurel. She passed away when we were teenagers. After she died, things changed dramatically in my family, and inside me. Having twins now, it's—" His voice trailed off, thick with suppressed emotion, leaving Jasmine's heart aching with empathy. In that moment, she finally understood his complex reaction to her news. The twins she carried weren't simply heirs to him, they represented something deeply personal, a painful echo of his past. "I'm so sorry, Leighton," she said sincerely, instinctively placing a comforting hand on his arm. "That must have been devastating." He glanced down at her hand on his sleeve, visibly startled by her touch but not pulling away. His eyes softened noticeably. "It was," he admitted quietly. "After losing her, I decided never to put myself in a situation where loss could hurt me that deeply again." Jasmine felt a deep wave of understanding and compassion wash through her. It was clear that behind his controlled exterior lay profound emotional scars that still shaped every decision he made. For the first time since they'd met, she saw not the powerful CEO, but a vulnerable man burdened by past tragedies. "It's ironic, isn't it?" he continued softly, glancing toward her, eyes intense but gentle. "I avoided personal connections to avoid pain. Yet here we are, bound together by circumstances I never could have foreseen." Jasmine smiled softly, her gaze unwavering. "Life rarely works out the way we plan. Sometimes the unexpected turns out to be exactly what we needed." A faint but genuine smile finally crossed Leighton's lips, transforming his entire face, softening its sharp edges. "Maybe you're right." The quiet intimacy of the moment lingered between them, neither quite ready to break the connection. Eventually, Jasmine stepped back gently, feeling an unexpected warmth settle deeply into her chest. "Thank you for showing me this side of yourself, Leighton. It means a lot." His gaze met hers deeply, lingering a beat longer than necessary. "Thank you for listening," he said quietly. "I haven't talked about Laurel in years." As Jasmine returned to her room later, she felt profoundly changed. What had begun as a simple business arrangement was rapidly evolving into something far more intricate. Despite every careful boundary set by contracts and agreements, an undeniable emotional bond was forming between them, complex, unexpected, and far more powerful than either of them had imagined possible. Days stretched into weeks, and the initial awkwardness between Jasmine and Leighton gradually gave way to a delicate, genuine companionship. Jasmine settled comfortably into her new routine, surprised by how naturally life in the luxurious mansion had become second nature. Even more surprising was the subtle warmth that had begun to thread itself quietly into the fabric of their daily interactions. Yet, despite their increasing closeness, Jasmine often sensed invisible walls still protecting Leighton's most guarded emotions. Although he had opened the door to his past once, briefly, revealing the heartbreaking loss of his sister, Jasmine noticed he quickly reverted to his familiar reserved demeanor, careful not to expose too much vulnerability again. One cool, rainy afternoon, Jasmine found herself exploring the expansive mansion in quiet solitude, her curiosity growing as she discovered hidden corners filled with intriguing glimpses into Leighton's life. Eventually, her wandering led her to a dimly lit hallway on the mansion's upper floor, a corridor she had not yet explored. At the end of this hall was an ornately carved door, slightly ajar, revealing a glimpse of muted daylight beyond. Jasmine hesitated momentarily, then quietly pushed open the door. What she found made her heart catch sharply in her chest. The room was frozen in time, carefully preserved. It was clearly a girl's bedroom, elegantly yet warmly decorated. Framed photographs lined the shelves, each one capturing glimpses of two smiling teenagers, Leighton and a girl who unmistakably had to be Laurel. Jasmine's breath tightened slightly as she stepped closer, drawn instinctively to the faded, happy memories so carefully preserved. A large photograph near the window captured her attention instantly. Leighton stood protectively beside his sister, his arm draped casually over her shoulders. Laurel's vibrant eyes sparkled with carefree joy, an emotion Jasmine had never seen reflected in Leighton's gaze since she'd known him. Deeply moved, Jasmine didn't immediately hear the quiet footsteps approaching until the gentle, deep voice behind her startled her from her thoughts. "You found her room." Jasmine spun around, heart racing. Leighton stood at the threshold, his eyes clouded with a quiet sadness. His posture was rigid, yet he didn't seem angry, only deeply vulnerable. "I'm sorry," Jasmine said hurriedly, suddenly feeling as if she had intruded on something incredibly personal. "I didn't mean to." Leighton shook his head slowly, stepping forward into the room, his gaze settling tenderly on the photographs. "It's all right. Honestly, I've avoided this room for years. Seeing someone else in here is, strange, but maybe necessary." Jasmine watched him quietly, her expression compassionate. "This was hers, wasn't it? Laurel's?" Leighton nodded, eyes lingering on the photo Jasmine had been observing moments before. His voice was unusually soft, tinged with nostalgia. "After she died, I left this room exactly as she'd left it. A small way to keep her memory alive, I suppose." He reached out carefully, picking up the framed photograph, his thumb brushing gently over the glass. Jasmine moved cautiously to stand beside him, her presence comforting without intrusion. "You were very close," she observed softly. He gave a faint, wistful smile. "Inseparable, actually. Losing her was losing a part of myself. It changed me, Jasmine. Permanently." There was a heavy pause, broken only by the gentle sound of rain against the window panes. Jasmine hesitated, sensing the emotional depth of the moment, yet determined to understand him better. "May I ask what happened?" Leighton's shoulders stiffened briefly, his jaw tensing slightly. Yet, after a deep breath, he continued softly, as if needing to finally release the burden he'd carried alone for years. "It was an accident. A sudden storm caused flooding near our family's vacation home. Laurel and I got caught out by the river. She slipped, and the current was too strong. I tried to hold on to her, but I couldn't." His voice faltered, and he stopped abruptly, swallowing painfully against the weight of his grief. Jasmine instinctively placed a gentle hand on his forearm, grounding him with her calm presence. "I'm so sorry, Leighton. You were both so young, it's unimaginable." He nodded silently, his expression strained, clearly grappling with emotions he rarely allowed himself to express. When he finally spoke again, his voice was a quiet whisper, filled with regret. "I've spent years blaming myself. I couldn't protect her. And after Laurel died, my parents withdrew into themselves, emotionally distant, unable to cope. I learned quickly that the only way to survive was to isolate myself emotionally, to keep others from becoming liabilities." He turned slightly toward Jasmine, his gray eyes vulnerable, pleading for understanding. "You asked why I chose surrogacy over a conventional family. This is the reason. Connection, attachment, it terrifies me. But now, with twins on the way, everything feels painfully familiar." Jasmine squeezed his arm gently, her expression tender. "I understand why you're afraid, but Leighton, avoiding love to avoid pain means never really living at all. Maybe it's time to forgive yourself." He stared at her quietly for a long moment, eyes wide with surprise, as if no one had ever dared say those words to him. Yet the tension in his features gradually softened, replaced by cautious gratitude. "You're remarkably wise, Jasmine. Wiser than I realized." She smiled softly, warmth spreading through her chest at his acknowledgement. We all carry burdens, Leighton. Sharing them makes them easier. Slowly, almost reluctantly, Leighton nodded. Maybe you're right. For years, I believed that vulnerability was weakness. But seeing you here, knowing how you've willingly stepped into something so complicated, makes me question everything I've assumed. A moment of silent understanding settled comfortably between them. Jasmine knew something profound had shifted within their relationship. Boundaries were slowly dissolving, leaving them standing in new territory, intimate, emotionally vulnerable territory neither had fully anticipated. Leighton eventually replaced the photograph gently, as if finally letting go of a fraction of his grief. He turned slowly to Jasmine, his expression serious yet open. Jasmine, I need you to promise something. She looked at him expectantly, her heart quickening slightly. Anything. Promise you'll tell me if things ever become overwhelming for you here. I brought you into this arrangement without truly considering how emotionally complex it could become. You deserve honesty and respect, not just compensation. Jasmine's smile deepened, touched deeply by his sincerity. I promise. And thank you, Leighton. Your honesty means more to me than I can express. They left Laurel's room together, closing the door gently behind them, symbolically closing a chapter yet simultaneously opening another, one filled with possibilities neither had allowed themselves to imagine before now. Weeks passed in gentle harmony, bringing a sense of peace Jasmine hadn't anticipated. Her pregnancy progressed smoothly, the twins healthy and thriving. With each passing day, she felt a deepening emotional connection to Leighton. The comfortable ease they'd built between them was something neither had consciously intended but now cherished. Yet beneath their newfound peace lurked a sense of cautious fragility, as if their happiness were suspended by threads too thin to fully trust. This delicate balance shattered abruptly one morning when Jasmine awoke to a flurry of frantic notifications vibrating incessantly on her phone. Blinking sleepily, she picked up the device, her confusion quickly giving way to shock as the glaring headline jumped off the screen. Billionaire Leighton Reigns' secret surrogate scandal exposed. Panic surged through Jasmine, her pulse racing, her vision blurred by anxiety as she scanned through the invasive details now laid bare for public scrutiny. Photos of her leaving the fertility clinic, snippets of leaked documents from their supposedly confidential agreement, and salacious rumors filled the article. Her throat tightened, overwhelmed by humiliation and fear. Footsteps echoed rapidly down the hallway, followed by a swift knock on her door. Before she could even respond, Leighton entered urgently, his face tight with anger and concern. You've seen? He asked tersely, eyes filled with controlled fury, his voice barely masking his turmoil. Jasmine nodded numbly, gripping the phone in trembling hands. Leighton, how did they? He shook his head bitterly, running a frustrated hand through his hair. Harlan Prescott, he growled darkly. My former business partner. He had access to my personal files. He warned me he'd retaliate after I cut ties over his unethical practices, but I never imagined he'd stoop this low. Jasmine felt her chest constrict painfully at the thought of their private lives being maliciously exposed. What do we do now? The press, they won't stop, will they? Leighton's jaw clenched tightly, his eyes determined yet conflicted. We'll weather this storm together, Jasmine. I promise, I won't let anyone harm you or our children. Despite the turmoil, Jasmine felt an unexpected surge of reassurance at his protective tone. Still, the reality of the scandal's consequences loomed heavily. Within hours, reporters crowded outside the gates, their relentless pursuit of a story creating a suffocating atmosphere inside the mansion. Leighton, normally composed and reserved, paced restlessly, making heated phone calls to his legal team and public relations advisors. Jasmine watched silently, feeling helpless amid the chaos enveloping them. Late that afternoon, as the media frenzy continued relentlessly outside, Leighton finally sat beside Jasmine in the quiet sanctuary of the library, his shoulders heavy with frustration and guilt. I'm sorry, he whispered bitterly. You never deserved this. I dragged you into my world without fully understanding the risks. Jasmine gently took his hand, trying to calm the turmoil she saw clearly etched in his features. This isn't your fault, Leighton. Neither of us expected something like this. His gaze softened slightly, filled with gratitude at her compassion. Still, I should have protected you better. You trusted me. And I still trust you, Jasmine assured softly, her voice gentle yet firm. We'll handle this together. Leighton held her gaze silently for a long moment, seemingly drawing strength from her unwavering support. Eventually, determination replaced the shadow of self-blame in his eyes. Then we faced them head-on. Within an hour, Leighton's media team arranged a press conference on the mansion's front steps. Cameras flashed wildly as reporters eagerly awaited their public statement. Jasmine's pulse quickened anxiously as she stood beside Leighton, her hand trembling slightly in his firm grip. He noticed, squeezing gently, silently reassuring her as they stepped forward together. The barrage of shouted questions erupted instantly, almost drowning Leighton's clear, commanding voice. Let me make something absolutely clear, he began confidently, instantly quieting the restless crowd. This arrangement was private by mutual consent, fully legal and agreed upon willingly by both parties involved. Miss Tyrell deserves respect and privacy, not invasive judgment or speculation. A hush fell momentarily, followed by another aggressive wave of questions. A reporter from a notorious tabloid loudly challenged, isn't this just a convenient cover-up? Paying someone to have your children isn't exactly conventional. Jasmine felt Leighton tense beside her, anger briefly flashing in his eyes, swiftly replaced by resolute calm. You're right, Leighton conceded unexpectedly, stunning the audience into silence. It isn't conventional. But Jasmine Tyrell is not merely a surrogate. She's my partner in every meaningful sense of the word. Jasmine's breath caught sharply in her chest at his unexpected declaration, warmth surging through her as he continued boldly. Yes, our arrangement began as a contractual agreement. But what started as business quickly became something more significant, more genuine. Jasmine and I are committed to our family, and we won't allow outside interference or judgment to define our relationship. His words echoed powerfully through the stunned crowd, leaving even the most cynical reporters temporarily speechless. Jasmine turned slightly toward Leighton, her eyes wide with disbelief and gratitude, her heart hammering loudly at his bold admission. The press conference ended swiftly, Leighton decisively guiding Jasmine back inside, away from the prying eyes of the media. Once behind closed doors, silence surrounded them, the aftermath of his statement weighing heavily between them. Leighton, Jasmine finally whispered, voice trembling slightly, you didn't have to say that. Yes, I did, he replied quietly, facing her directly, sincerity radiating from him. Every word was true, Jasmine. Our arrangement stopped being merely contractual a long time ago. I should have admitted it sooner, but I was afraid. Afraid of what? She asked softly, her heart fluttering nervously. He took a deep, steadying breath, stepping closer until their proximity felt almost intimate. His eyes met hers deeply, vulnerability unmasked completely. Afraid of how much you matter to me, how deeply I care for you. Afraid that admitting it would complicate things even more. Jasmine reached out impulsively, gently touching his cheek, feeling the warmth of his skin beneath her fingertips. Leighton, it's already complicated. But now it's honest. I care about you deeply, too. Emotion filled his eyes, relief and gratitude mingling together. Slowly, he leaned in, pressing a tender, meaningful kiss to her forehead. Then we'll face whatever comes next together, he whispered gently, his voice thick with sincerity. No more contracts, no more boundaries. Just us. Jasmine smiled softly, warmth spreading through her chest. Just us, she agreed quietly, feeling strangely at peace despite the chaos still raging beyond their walls. Together, they stood quietly in the dimming afternoon light, silently reaffirming a bond neither had anticipated yet now found impossible to deny. In the days following the turbulent press conference, Jasmine and Leighton navigated an altered landscape. The initial storm of scandal gradually quieted, but their lives remained irrevocably changed. Media interest lingered, though now tempered by the sincerity of Leighton's powerful admission. Inside the mansion, their dynamic shifted noticeably. Professional boundaries dissolved entirely, replaced by a tentative yet genuine emotional closeness. Despite their new intimacy, Jasmine still felt a lingering uncertainty. The depth of their relationship was now clearer, but the question of their future loomed, unspoken yet present, adding a fragile complexity to their interactions. Jasmine worried about the sustainability of their feelings once the immediate crisis passed, though her heart secretly yearned for permanence. Late one afternoon, Jasmine rested comfortably in the sunlit conservatory overlooking lush gardens bursting with blooms. Her pregnancy had reached a crucial stage, and fatigue now became a frequent companion. Leighton insisted she rest frequently, though Jasmine suspected it was also his quiet way of asserting protective control amid lingering external pressures. She closed her eyes briefly, savoring the quiet warmth, when soft footsteps approaching drew her attention. Opening her eyes, she smiled gently as Leighton entered, his normally confident demeanor softened by a newfound gentleness reserved exclusively for her. "How are you feeling?" he asked quietly, genuine concern coloring his tone as he took the chair beside her, watching her intently. "I'm fine, just tired," she admitted softly, stretching slightly, her eyes warm with affection as she looked at him. "You don't need to worry so much." He smiled faintly, clearly amused by her gentle teasing. "Impossible not to worry. It's becoming a habit." Jasmine laughed softly, feeling grateful for this uncomplicated moment. Yet the lingering silence afterward made her hesitate, sensing an unspoken tension. "What is it?" she asked finally, noticing his unusually thoughtful expression. Leighton's eyes met hers quietly, a gentle seriousness settling in their depths. "I've been thinking about our situation, about you and me." Jasmine's pulse quickened nervously, though she forced herself to remain calm. "And what have you concluded?" Leighton hesitated, visibly gathering courage before continuing. "I meant what I said publicly. But now I want to make it real, officially real. I don't want uncertainty hanging over us anymore." She felt her heart begin to race as anticipation mingled with uncertainty. "What exactly do you mean, Leighton?" He shifted closer, his voice earnest yet vulnerable. "I mean, Jasmine, that I want to marry you, not just for public image, or because of our arrangement, but because it's genuinely what I want. I want you as my wife, not as a surrogate, or even just a partner. I want something deeper, something permanent." For a moment, Jasmine felt stunned into silence. Her throat tightened as powerful emotions surged within her, warmth and anxiety intertwined. His sincere proposal touched something deep inside her, yet she struggled to believe he truly wanted more than just to rectify their complicated arrangement. Noticing her hesitation, Leighton reached out, gently taking her hands, his expression deeply sincere. "I know it's sudden. Maybe you think this is impulsive, but Jasmine, nothing in my life has felt more real than what I feel for you now. You've changed everything for me, making me see clearly for the first time in years." Jasmine stared deeply into his eyes, searching for any hint of doubt or fear. She found none, only warmth, sincerity, and vulnerability she'd never imagined in him previously. "Are you sure, Leighton?" she whispered softly, her voice trembling slightly with emotion. "Marriage is a huge step. It's forever." "I've never been more sure about anything," he answered firmly, conviction radiating from him. "When I first proposed our arrangement, it was entirely pragmatic, completely unemotional. Now the thought of not having you in my life terrifies me. The idea of waking up without seeing you, without hearing your voice, it's unimaginable. You've brought hope and happiness into a life I didn't realize was empty." Emotion welled heavily in Jasmine's chest, tears gently filling her eyes as she absorbed his heartfelt words. Everything she'd secretly hoped he felt, but feared to believe, was suddenly laid bare before her, raw and deeply genuine. "Yes, Leighton," she finally whispered, feeling warmth flooding her entire being, banishing lingering doubts. "I'll marry you." A radiant smile broke across Leighton's face, utterly transforming his usually controlled expression. Gently, tenderly, he leaned forward, brushing a soft kiss against her lips, gentle yet powerful, sealing their promise silently and profoundly. In the following days, they quietly planned a simple, intimate ceremony, determined to shield this precious moment from outside intrusion. Jasmine felt happiness she'd scarcely allowed herself to dream of. Yet beneath their joy, she sensed a deeper layer of complexity. Leighton's public reputation still hung delicately balanced, and privately, she knew he still struggled to overcome fears born from past tragedy. One evening, as the sky darkened with twilight, Jasmine found Leighton alone on the terrace, gazing thoughtfully at the distant skyline. She approached quietly, wrapping her shawl tighter against the cool evening breeze. "What are you thinking about?" she asked softly, standing closely beside him. He hesitated briefly, then spoke quietly, eyes remaining fixed ahead. "My sister would have loved you. She was always far wiser than me, she would have encouraged me to trust happiness again." Jasmine gently touched his arm, feeling tenderness toward the vulnerable man beside her. "Maybe she's still guiding you," she whispered gently. "Maybe all of this happened for a reason, bringing us together to heal the wounds you've carried so long." Leighton turned toward her, his eyes softening deeply, filled with quiet gratitude. "Maybe you're right. But it still scares me, letting myself truly be happy." "You don't have to be afraid," Jasmine reassured softly, her voice steady and comforting. "I'm here with you, Leighton. We'll face everything together. You don't need to carry the pain alone anymore." Slowly, carefully, Leighton wrapped his arms around Jasmine, pulling her close, holding her securely. They stood quietly together, watching as night softly settled around them, stars gradually illuminating the dark sky above. "I love you, Jasmine," he murmured finally, voice thick with emotion, yet calm with newfound acceptance. "I never expected it, never believed it possible. But I love you more deeply than I can fully express." Her heart swelled warmly as tears gathered softly in her eyes. She pressed closer, feeling completely secure within the shelter of his embrace. "I love you too, Leighton. I promise, I'll always be here." In that moment, beneath a starlit sky, their future became clear, their commitment solidified not merely by circumstance or convenience but by deep, undeniable love. Together they stood quietly, hearts fully open, ready at last to embrace the happiness that had so unexpectedly found them. As Jasmine's pregnancy advanced toward its final weeks, excitement and nervous anticipation filled every corner of the sprawling mansion. The atmosphere buzzed with a mixture of joy, anxiety, and meticulous preparations. Jasmine had grown used to constant check-ins from Leighton, whose protective instincts intensified as her due date approached. Despite the warmth of their deepening bond, a subtle tension hovered, an unspoken awareness of the monumental change ahead. On a chilly evening in early spring, as heavy rain drummed rhythmically against the large windows, Jasmine felt a sudden sharp pain ripple through her abdomen. Her breath hitched, a wave of anxiety tightening her chest as another powerful contraction quickly followed. Leighton, sensing something was wrong, looked up from his laptop immediately, concern darkening his eyes. "Jasmine? What's happening?" I think it's time," she managed softly, gripping the armrest of her chair, trying to steady her racing heartbeat. Leighton stood abruptly, crossing the room swiftly to her side, his usually calm demeanor now fraught with urgency. "I'll call Dr. Calloway immediately." Within moments, the mansion became a hive of activity, staff moving rapidly yet quietly, packing overnight bags and coordinating preparations for Jasmine's journey to the hospital. Leighton remained close by her side, offering steady reassurance despite his obvious nervousness. At the hospital, the private suite was a calm refuge amidst the clinical atmosphere. Jasmine lay quietly, breathing carefully through contractions, each one stronger and closer together than the last. Leighton, tense yet determined, held her hand gently, murmuring quiet words of encouragement as medical staff moved efficiently around them. Hours passed, each minute filled with an intensity Jasmine had never anticipated. Leighton's presence was comforting, yet she saw clearly the deep worry etched into his features, intensified by memories of past tragedies haunting his thoughts. She squeezed his hand reassuringly, silently reminding him of her promise, that they would face everything together. Dr. Calloway entered frequently, calmly guiding Jasmine through labor, her presence soothing yet authoritative. But as Jasmine's labor progressed, unexpected complications arose. Suddenly, monitors flashed urgently, prompting a rapid flurry of medical activity around her bed. "What's happening?" Leighton's voice was edged with barely restrained panic, eyes fixed anxiously on Jasmine's face. Dr. Calloway responded calmly but firmly, "The babies are experiencing distress. Jasmine needs immediate intervention. We're going to have to perform an emergency C-section." Fear surged sharply through Jasmine, echoed clearly in Leighton's suddenly pale face. Yet he quickly steadied himself, leaning close, gripping her hand tightly. "You're going to be okay," he whispered, voice thick with emotion yet filled with strength. "You and the babies, I promise." /n/n tears blurred Jasmine's vision briefly, not from fear for herself but from the raw intensity of love and fear in Leighton's eyes. "Stay with me," she pleaded softly, heart hammering as medical staff rapidly prepared her for surgery. "I'm not going anywhere," Leighton vowed fiercely, his voice unshakable despite his visible distress. "I'll be right here the whole time." Minutes felt like hours as Jasmine was wheeled swiftly into the operating room, bright lights glaring harshly above her. Leighton remained at her side, masked and tense, his reassuring presence the only anchor grounding her amid the chaos of rapid medical procedures. As doctors worked efficiently, Jasmine felt strangely detached, drifting through a surreal haze, her mind fixated only on Leighton's comforting presence. She heard the distant yet powerful cries of their first child, a healthy, powerful sound that sent an intense wave of relief and joy through her heart. Moments later, another cry echoed, the second twin born safely. Tears filled her eyes instantly, relief and overwhelming happiness mingling with the profound exhaustion now gripping her body. Yet amid the relief came sudden alarm as Jasmine felt consciousness slipping, her vision blurring, the voices of doctors growing distant and distorted. She struggled briefly against the heavy darkness, panic surging through her as she realized something was seriously wrong. Leighton's urgent voice sounded distant but clear, filled with frantic desperation. "Jasmine. Jasmine, stay with me. Don't leave me, please." /n/n she heard the strain in his voice, the raw fear cutting deeply through the haze enveloping her. Her heart ached fiercely at the thought of leaving him alone, of breaking the promise she'd so earnestly made. Doctors moved swiftly around her, urgency palpable in their voices, but Jasmine's thoughts fixed solely on Leighton. She fought stubbornly against the darkness, determined not to let go, desperately clinging to the sound of his voice as if it were her lifeline. "Please," she heard him whisper, his voice thick, breaking slightly, a raw vulnerability she'd rarely witnessed so openly. "I can't lose you. Jasmine, please fight." /n/n the depth of his desperation, the undeniable love woven deeply into his plea, became the strength Jasmine needed. She grasped fiercely onto consciousness, refusing to surrender to the heavy pull of darkness. Gradually, painfully, Jasmine felt herself stabilizing, the frantic activity around her slowly quieting, the urgent voices becoming calm once more. Consciousness returned slowly, softly, and when she finally opened her eyes, Leighton's tear-filled, exhausted face was the first thing she saw clearly. "Jasmine," he whispered hoarsely, relief flooding visibly across his features as he carefully took her hand again. His eyes, normally so controlled, now openly reflected profound love, fear, and gratitude. "You're okay. You came back. /n/n I promised you," she managed weakly, smiling faintly despite the lingering exhaustion. "I told you I'd stay." N Leighton pressed her hand gently to his lips, eyes closing briefly with immense relief. You terrified me. I've never been so afraid. N I'm here, she reassured softly, squeezing his hand lightly, gratitude and love clear in her exhausted yet peaceful gaze. Our babies? Are they, N perfect, he replied softly, smiling warmly through tears. Strong and healthy. You did amazing, Jasmine. You're amazing. N hours later, in the peaceful quiet of her private hospital suite, Jasmine finally held their children, her heart swelling with an indescribable joy and overwhelming love. Beside her, Leighton watched tenderly, his features softened by profound emotion. As he gently touched each tiny hand, Jasmine clearly saw the shadow of past grief finally lift fully from his expression, replaced now by peace, acceptance, and quiet happiness. N we made it, she whispered, voice full of wonder and quiet triumph. N Leighton leaned in gently, kissing her softly, tenderly. Because of you, he murmured softly, sincerity radiating from him. You brought me back to life, Jasmine. N together, they watched their children sleeping peacefully, feeling deeply grateful and forever changed by the profound journey they'd survived, bound together more tightly, and more permanently, than either had ever imagined possible. The weeks following the birth of their twins were a blur of quiet chaos, sleepless nights, and moments so tender Jasmine often found herself in tears without warning. Her recovery from the emergency surgery was slower than expected, but each time she opened her eyes to see Leighton by her side, gently rocking one of the babies or softly brushing her hair back from her face, she felt the kind of peace she had never known. The pain, the fear, even the memory of nearly losing everything, it all softened in the face of this new life they had created. The twins were named Callan and Zephyra. Callan, for strength and light. Zephyra, for wind and grace. Both names chosen not from tradition or family legacy, but from meaning, the kind that held power, rebirth, and hope. And it was hope that filled their home now, a warmth that spread slowly but undeniably into every corner of the estate that had once felt like a palace of glass and silence. Leighton changed before Jasmine's eyes. Gone was the guarded, calculated businessman who once drew lines between emotions and obligations. In his place was a man who spoke softly to his children in the early hours of morning, who insisted on changing diapers despite having never touched one before, and who cradled Zephyra against his chest as though she were made of spun sugar. Jasmine saw a new version of him take shape with every passing day. And what humbled her most was that he never ran from the vulnerability it required. One warm afternoon, several weeks after the twins came home, Jasmine sat beneath the garden pergola, the babies sleeping in the shade beside her, while Leighton stood a few steps away speaking to someone on the phone. His voice, once so clipped and cold in his business dealings, had softened even in those interactions. He laughed more now. Smiled without hesitation. There were still flashes of his old self, calculated, powerful, undeniably driven, but something fundamental had shifted. The man who once feared loss more than anything now embraced the unpredictable, messy, beautiful shape of love. He ended the call and walked back to her, his eyes already searching hers with that quiet intensity she had come to know so well. I've delegated full operations of Rain's Technologies, he said casually, taking a seat beside her and resting his hand lightly on her thigh. I'm officially stepping back. Board meetings only. No more 14-hour workdays. Jasmine looked at him in disbelief. You're serious? He nodded. I missed the first half of my life chasing control. I'm not going to miss the second half chasing ghosts. I have something real now. Someone real. I want to be present. For you. For them. Emotion caught in her throat as she reached for his hand, intertwining their fingers. You don't have to give up everything to prove something, Leighton. You've already proven more than I ever asked. I'm not giving anything up, he said, lifting her hand to his lips. I'm finally choosing something. Choosing you. A long silence passed between them, filled only by the rustling breeze and the soft, even breathing of their children. Then, without fanfare, without grandiosity, Leighton stood. "I wanted to wait for the perfect moment," he began, his voice a little too steady, his posture just slightly too formal, "but I've learned something recently. Perfect doesn't exist. Just real. Honest. And this, right now, is the most honest moment I've ever lived." Jasmine's breath caught as he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. No grand speech, no crowd, no dramatic backdrop, just the sky, the trees, their children sleeping, and the man who had once sworn off love now kneeling before her. "Jasmine Tyrell," he said, opening the box to reveal a simple but breathtaking ring, gold with a pale sapphire the color of twilight. "You've been my turning point, my anchor, my hope. Marry me. Not because of obligation or scandal or children, but because I love you with every part of myself. Marry me because I can't imagine another morning without you." Tears filled her eyes before she could answer. It wasn't just the words, it was the man saying them. The man who once built walls higher than anyone could climb. The man who now tore them down with every act of tenderness, every moment of honesty. She nodded through her tears, laughing and crying all at once. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, I'll marry you." He stood and pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly, as if even now he couldn't quite believe she was real. The baby stirred softly, as if sensing the shift in the air, the quiet, joyful gravity of the moment. Later that evening, with twilight casting lavender shadows over the garden, Jasmine sat in the nursery, feeding Zephyr while Leighton rocked Callan nearby. There was no music, no fanfare, only the hush of soft breathing and the occasional creak of the rocking chair. She looked up at him, her heart so full it ached. "I still don't understand how we got here," she said softly. Leighton smiled, his eyes fixed on their son, then meeting hers. "We didn't get here by following rules. We got here by breaking every one of them. And thank God we did." And in the quiet hum of their new life, Jasmine finally understood something she had only guessed before: love didn't have to be perfect, predictable, or even planned. Sometimes it arrived like a storm, shook everything apart, and left something far stronger and more beautiful in its wake. Something worth everything. Something permanent.